Welcome to Conversations with Writers. I'm Andy. I'm a writer, and this is an educational YouTube series meant to catalog writing strategies and philosophies through conversations with other writers. Megan Reilley is an associate teaching professor at the Pennsylvania State University, where she teaches writing. Previously, she taught at several liberal arts colleges in the Baltimore area and in the Goucher Prison Education Partnership. Before her career shift to higher education, Megan was an editorial professional for more than 20 years, and she is co-editor of a nonfiction craft literary magazine, Proximity True. Megan's writing has appeared in Rappahannock Review, 5 Minute Lit, Proximity True, and 3 Cents. Her memoir examining societal and personal expectations of female identity, mothering, female bodies, and the bodies of our children is in progress. And this is my conversation with Megan.
Hey, Andy.
How are you?
I'm well, thanks.
So what are you working on now, and what motivated the project?
That's a tough question to answer because at the moment I feel like I'm not working on anything. It's been a very busy year of change in my professional and personal life. So writing has mostly consisted of note-taking and reading and reflecting. But the project I am working on and doing that effort toward is a memoir. And I was thinking before we hopped on here how I would describe it because it's still in progress. And I think at its most simplistic, I would summarize it by saying it's about finding courage to pursue authenticity, even if it means giving up a comfortable life. Um, and it was inspired by one of my kids who transitioned genders in middle school. And that coincided with a 30-year relationship, sort of unraveling and making difficult choices around all of that. But all of it is guided by the fact that I have lived my entire life as what I refer to myself as, which is a motherless daughter. My mother died when I was about 13. And, navigating a full parenting life and, losing the relationship that I found safety and comfort in for the duration of my life it had its unique challenges, let's just say that. And so that's what I'm exploring: gender identity, gender roles, how we perform gender with our children, with our partners, with our parents, whether they be alive or not. And so, yeah, a lot of themes going on in the work, and I'm, heading in a direction.
I can't wait to read it.
I can't wait to finish it.
What have you learned about yourself through writing?
That is a great question. I asked my 13-year-old daughter that question, and she said, "You should say that it's that you have a lot of problems." And I said, okay. But actually, I think what I've learned is that I do have a lot of problems, but I've been able to turn problems into opportunities, and that oftentimes problems are gifts, even if they don't present themselves as such in the moment. And I've learned that I'm a pretty creative problem solver, which has been a nice realization to make. Problems don't have to be things that sink you. There are things that force us out of comfortable spaces and make us grow and evolve. So yeah, I think the writing, documenting things and working through some of those problems has helped me solve them.
What's the role or responsibility of writing for you? What keeps you generating material? Why write?
There's that sort of famous saying in at least in nonfiction circles. I don't know if they talk about it in fiction or poetry or other circles, but in nonfiction, there's a quote that goes something like, you should write because there's someone out there whose wound is in the shape of your words, or something like that. I think I've probably butchered that quote. However, that's kind of the gist of it for me. It's about community. It's about connecting. I really do feel like my story is not it's unique, but it's not uncommon. I think many people go through radical change at midlife. There are many families out there whose understanding of their child's gender has changed or will change. Maybe they haven't realized it yet. Maybe that hasn't happened yet. But there are families for whom that will happen. And it's difficult. It's a time that can make you feel scared and alone and unsure how to handle, the things that have come and sat right in your lap. And, in the interest of helping others learn from my mistakes and my successes, my wins, that keeps me writing. But fostering community, right? Connection and making meaning, I think are sort of the main reasons that I keep going back to it. And I think, any writer will tell you writing is not easy, especially if you're writing about difficult things. But I think my words are going to be meaningful to someone someday. And that's what keeps me moving forward.
I love that answer, and I completely agree that writing is this place where we can find community. I think there is this sort of misnomer that we all sit in this isolated space and it's we don't need anyone else, but really this is how we forge community. This is how we identify each other and we find what resonates, and then we start creating writing groups and all kinds of other things to stay connected.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what makes you understand that the things that happen to you that you're trying to make sense of in your writing do have meaning to other people. People will say, oh my gosh, I don't feel so alone. I don't feel so worried or scared, or I know it's going to be okay because you went through this and it was okay, or your child went through this and it was okay. And that's so important.
When you're struggling to write for whatever reason, what strategies do you use to get yourself back to the page?
Every writer has that problem from time to time, and I'm sure everyone has an opinion on, what is supposed to work when you hit a block or a bump in the road. Some people will say, you should write every day, just anything, a few lines, a couple hundred words, make it part of your daily routine. That has not worked well for me. And forcing myself to try to write something when I don't feel inspired to do it or drawn or motivated to do it sort of has the opposite effect. It makes me just, completely check out from what I'm writing. But I tend to be an overthinker just as a personality characteristic. And if I am trying too hard to think about what I'm going to write, that is often my biggest challenge. I also was an editor for over 20 years, and I find myself starting to write and then editing myself before the thought has really progressed and developed and matured. So the way I get around that is to write emails to myself or write notes on my phone, something that feels low stakes, right? It feels really different. I don't know why, but it's just a trick for my brain not to sit down and open up a Word document or open up a previous piece of writing, right? But just something casual, low investment, a note on my phone, an email to myself or to a loved one, someone I trust to read my writing. This was the way my mentor in grad school got me through some really difficult months where I was struggling to finish my thesis. And she said, just, every day when you get up, just write me an email. Whatever you write is fine. She sort of like took off the weight or the expectation of needing to produce a certain number of words in a certain package by a certain time, right? And just said, sit down and just dash out whatever's on your mind. And so at 5 a.m., I would wake up and sit in my kitchen and write an email to my mentor and just say, this is what it is today. And I generated just tens and tens of thousands of words in this way. It was incredibly productive for me at a time where I thought I wasn't going to be able to write at all. So little tricks of the mind work well for me. And there's a really great essay. It's from the 80s, the early 80s, I think maybe 1981 or 82, by Betty Flowers. And it's called Madman, Architect, Carpenter, Judge. And a colleague of mine at Goucher College introduced me to it. He used it in his first year composition classroom with his students, and I also use it in my first year composition classroom. But I also like it as a writer because it looks at these four personas that we occupy as writers. The madman who just sits down and brainstorms something and just is that creative invention phase. the architect who, designs the way the content is going to look, the carpenter who fine tunes it, right, and makes it sound really nice and fixes the grammar and the syntax. And then the judge who sits back and says, is this the way I want it? What else do I need to do? Do I need more proofreading? Do I need to do something structural? And it really helps me separate out these, pieces of the writing process and helps me embrace that madman phase where I'm just sitting down, I don't know what I'm writing. I'm just, following wherever my brain is going. But it's a great essay with a lot of value, I think, for writers, but also for students.
I love that strategy and I can't wait to use it myself. If it's just an email to a friend, that just takes all the pressure away.
Yeah, pressure is tough.
What revision strategy or strategies do you find most useful when revising your own work and why? What problems or challenges do these activities help you solve?
I really had to think about this question when I saw that it was one you were going to ask me. And I stand in front of students every day and, try to give them revision strategies. But for myself, I have a very difficult time changing things once they're written. That's been a huge, huge challenge as a writer. I feel very invested in something once I've put it on the page, and I am hesitant to do anything major to it. I have, moving whole paragraphs or starting. I've tried to start whole essays over from scratch, and that never goes well. So, what I have found works best for me is rest. And I mean a lot of rest. I mean, sometimes I will write an essay and I will not look at it for a year, 6 months, a year, and go back to it because I've matured. I've moved on. My mindset might be different. I've evolved as a human. My understanding of my topic has evolved or changed. I've gained some new wisdom. And when I bring that back into the work, I can then revise it in a meaningful way. Whereas if I don't give it enough time to rest, I find myself just nitpicking, like the editor in me takes over and it's like, oh, let me move this comma. Oh, let me change this one word. And I don't think those are really meaningful revisions in the grand scheme of things, not when there's major work to be done. I mean, those revisions are also important and they have a place. But for meaningful revision and moving a work forward, I really have to let it simmer, take myself out of the picture for a while.
What is your favorite part of the writing process and why?
I think it's that invention generation phase. I've tried to be that writer who sits down and writes every day for a certain number of times or a certain amount of words. And I have had, moderate success doing that from time to time. But I seem to be struck by work and then I have to get it out. And it's really exciting when something visits you that way. And you just feel inspired to, capture it. And that's my favorite part, when I feel something that's just come down into my brain and it's like, let me out, let me out. You have to say this thing or you have to write this, perspective. I find that just very invigorating. And it can hold me over, right? If I can get a whole essay out and then let it sit for a bit, maybe another one will visit from time to time. At least that's been my approach so far. I may have to rein it in and take more of a boss-like attitude over my writing, but that works best for me and it keeps me interested in the writing.
What reading suggestions do you have? What authors do you keep in your back pocket?
So many good ones that we could talk about. The first memoir that I read, possibly ever, I don't think I could say ever, because I think I read a few memoirs when I was a teenager, even though I was going through like my Stephen King phase and my Piers Anthony phase. I think I did read a few memoirs because I remember a couple random memoir type things. But the first memoir I read as a writer in my, fresh identity as a writer in my adult life was by Vivian Gornick, and it's called Fierce Attachments. And it really, I don't know if it's because it was the first thing I read when I was working on my own memoir, or if it was the nature of the memoir itself. It looks at a mother-daughter relationship, an adult mother-daughter relationship, and traces, the origins of the relationship. And the structure is really interesting because the chapters cycle back and forth between a walk that the author is taking with her adult daughter. I'm sorry, the the author is the adult daughter. So it's a walk that the daughter is taking with her mother through New York City. And then the intermittent chapters are flashbacks to her childhood or her mother's childhood. And so you have this nice thread of the adult relationship and then the backstory. And they're all sort of like woven together in this nice structure. So that one always has sat with me. And again, I don't know if it's because it's the first thing I read, or if it's the nature of the relationships, or if it's the structure, but I really, really like it. And of course, Vivian Gornick is the author of the very well-known The Situation, the Story, which is a book I use with first-year composition students and have also read myself, which is, magnificent. So I like that work as well. The other author who I am just such a huge fan of is Kiese Lehman and his memoir, Heavy. He's also written a number of essay collections, and he's just an incredible writer. But what I like about his memoir, Heavy, is two things. First of all, the language is so warm. As an example of writing a warm, accessible, sort of love-filled memoir, Heavy is just my favorite. It's just my favorite. His language is so welcoming and beautiful. But the other thing that he does really, really well is he exhibits this incredible restraint in what he reveals or talks about in the memoir. So you get impressions of things that happened to him or around him without him explicitly stating them. And he's just a master in that. Just really incredible ability to show incredible restraint in what he shares. So those are a couple of my favorite authors. I think the other book I do want to mention that I really felt is influential in my own work is Gina Frangello's Blow Your House Down, which is a more recent memoir where she's the adulterer and she literally dismantles her entire life to be with her lover. And it's just incredibly self-critical, self-reflective, the insight that she has into patriarchy, misogyny, gender roles, the confines of marital relationships and others is astounding. And she's just not afraid at all to be bold and brave in how she paints herself and others in the story. And she was criticized quite widely for it, picked apart, as you might imagine. But she's brilliant. Her writing's brilliant, and that book is brilliant. So I look to that a lot. I have almost every page in that memoir book dog-eared for different reasons, either turn of phrase or the way she emotes something or the way she characterizes an experience. It's just an incredible, incredible book. I could go on and on.
Thank you for making time to do this interview with me. I've learned so much.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciated it.